Thank you all for coming to our grad school CES. I'd like to thank our panelists for being here and all the students for coming. I'm just going to give basic introductions for all our panelists that we have here. I'm going to start at the left. We have Kate Aubrecht from, she has a master's in arts, in English as a second language from Hamann University. And then to her right is Scott McMahon. He is a master's of public policy from the Humphrey School of Public Affairs at the U of M, and also a master of nonprofit administration from Mendoza College of Business at the University of Notre Dame. To his right is Kelsey Kaye. She is a master's in physician assistant studies from the University of Wisconsin. Going down the line is Noel Meyer. He is pursuing a master's in school counseling at St. Cloud State University. And then we have Maia Hamann. She has a doctorate in musical arts from the Bassoon Performance School at the University of Minnesota. And then last one is Brianwavnack, and he has an MBA from the Carlson School of Management. So we'll open up to Kate. Go ahead. Nope.
My name is Kate. I graduated in 2006. My undergrad was elementary ed, but my path to grad school started when I was a junior. I went to study abroad in Cork, Ireland, and when I was there, my life changed a lot because I became a Christian, so I realized I was a sinner and I needed a savior, and after that I wanted to be a missionary. So there are lots of opportunities to teach English overseas, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to share the good news about Jesus, that he died for us and we can go to heaven if we believe in him. So I didn't go to grad school right away. I went to a discipleship training school with Youth with a Mission, and I did outreach in Peru, and then I was teaching English in Japan, and after that I realized I needed more training. So that's when I started pursuing my master's, and actually I don't have it yet, but I'm working on it still. So my first step was to get a certificate for teaching English as a foreign language, and I did that in a summer intensive program at Hamann. So that was just 1 month of intensive coursework. After that, I went to, I went traveling somewhere and teaching. Then I wanted to pursue the advanced certificate, so I went back for 1 more year of schooling. And those credits from the certificate and advanced certificate will count for my master's. So last year I was teaching English in the Czech Republic, English and Bible as a missionary, and now I'm finishing the master's, so I have about 1 year left. So some of the challenges that I think come as part of doing master's coursework are balancing work and studies, because a lot of programs, people work and then they take courses in the evening. So it's kind of hard to balance your life and your interests, but I'm sure you guys can do it because you are college students, so you know how to balance extracurriculars and everything. But that's also a perk because a lot of the classes that I've taken are online or in the evenings or on the weekend. So it works with people's schedules because a lot of students are adults, so they try to coordinate with everyone. And one tip that I have is, at least for my program, a person can start out as a continuing education student. So that means they can take courses from their potential program without officially applying to the program. So you can pay for them one by one. And if you like the courses, then you can officially apply to the master's. But it works out really well because then you know some of the professors from the university, and they can write letters of recommendation for you. And that can be really useful for getting accepted. And also you can use some of the coursework, like if I wrote a paper for my coursework that I was taking as a continuing ed student, then I could submit it. Well, I'd probably have to write a new version, but I could submit it as a work sample for my application. So it's a little bit about me. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Scott McMahon. Thank you all for coming out tonight. It's great to see future alums sitting in the room. As indicated, I've got my Master in Public Policy and Master in Nonprofit Administration. I kind of wandered into the path of getting these 2 degrees after my first work experience out of St. John's, kind of recognizing that I needed to get some more credentials behind me in order to advance in the career path that I was headed down. The other interesting thing about my experience is after I finished up my studies at the Humphrey Institute, or now the Humphrey School of Public Affairs at the U of M, I actually worked in the dean's office for about a year and kind of was his eyes and ears kind of watching over admissions and financial aid and some of those things. So I kind of have the dual track understanding as to what all goes into graduate school, both from the student standpoint and the administration standpoint. This whole process has led me now, I'm serving as the Director of Government and Community Affairs for the Minnesota Private College Council. So in short, what that means is I got to be St. John St. Ben's lobbyist, which is a pretty cool experience. So it's part of my way of giving back. For me, the biggest advice that I can think of as far as grad school is don't be afraid if you're not completely sure what you want to do, to go off and get some experience in some other areas, and then you can always go back to grad school. That's kind of the great thing about the experience. For me, I got into environmental policy, and that was my intent, is to focus on energy issues. Since then, I've done, since actually going to grad school and completing, I've done healthcare and higher ed policy. So things can change as you progress around. From the admission standpoint, from the perspective that I have, both as a student and then work in higher ed, is that one of the most critical things to think about as you're applying for graduate school is your personal statement. I know the admissions departments at both my programs at Notre Dame and the U of M probably lean the heaviest on what you have to say about yourself and why you want to do the program versus anything else that you're going to have on your application material. So spend some time thinking about what you want to say in that portion of your application.
My name's Kelsey, and I got my Master's in Physician Assistant Studies at the UW La Crosse. I did my undergrad here at St. Ben, St. John's in natural science. And then I also did a minor in gender and women's studies, just to kind of do something other than the science track. I knew I wanted to do something in medicine as a freshman, but I wasn't quite sure. I thought pre-dental, pre-med, and ended up in pre-PA just because I liked what the PA career had to offer. I started my grad school just a couple weeks after graduating St. Ben's, so I would say that's a challenge. If you're looking at going right into grad school, don't be afraid to take a year off if you need to do that, but as a perk, I think I was used to studying and it was easy to adjust into the grad school path, so applying can seem a little daunting during school, but if you want to go straight through, you can definitely do it. St. Ben's and St. John's, if you can handle the coursework here, you can handle grad school, you'll be fine. And I guess the biggest challenge, one of the biggest I think for a lot of people is financial. If you're planning for grad school, but there's a lot of good grants and scholarships out there. And if you want to do it, it'll pay off in the end. As far as tips for grad school, I think make sure you research the schools you want to go to and know why you want to go there. I know a lot of applicants will apply at multiple schools, and I was on the admissions a little bit for La Crosse, and seeing people come in and say, things that weren't quite in line with the mission of the school. I think it's important to know your school so you know what they're looking for. We had one applicant who came in and said they wanted to work in rural Milwaukee when UW La Crosse's statement is or in urban Milwaukee, and UW La Crosse's statement is to provide practitioners in rural areas. Just know your school and make sure that you're applying to a school that your values are in line with theirs. I guess would be my biggest admission tip.
I'm Noel Meyer. I graduated from here just a couple of years ago, 2010. I guess my major is not related to school counseling at all. I was political science and sociology pre-law, and I just went a completely different direction, and that's fine to do too. I came into college, I didn't even think. I knew I was going to be a lawyer and all that, and I kind of got to my junior year and started doing some service learning, started coaching, and I was just like, wow, I do not want to be a lawyer. And so I was thinking, okay, maybe I'll go into business, and then I looked at some of that, and I'm like, I really don't like working that much. I really do. I'm like, that would seem like work to me. Being a lawyer would seem like work to me. So I went, okay, what is a job that I can do where I don't have to feel like I'm at work? And I went, oh, school counseling, okay. Just meet with kids and make schedules and stuff like that. Well, yeah, sounds pretty good. So I decided to go for school counseling. I graduated in, actually, I got done with school in December, so then I went out and coached wrestling, coached track, coached little kids gymnastics, which was pretty hilarious. And then started that summer, I started my grad school program, and so far have loved it. Right now I am at St. Michael Albertville as a school counseling intern, so it's quite a challenge. To say the least. I live in St. Cloud, and you know, one of the challenges about grad school is you have to have your life, and you have to make some money on the side, and you have to go to school, and that was the biggest challenge for me. For example, right now, I wake up at 5:30, I get to school at 7, I get done at 3, I hop on the road and come back to St. John's because I coach football here. So come back here so that I can actually make some money, because for your internship you don't get paid at all. And then come back here, I'm here until 7 or 8, and then I go home and watch TV for an hour and go to bed and start all over again. And it's tough, but you just have to see the light at the end of the tunnel and just know that. One of the questions is, what are the perks of being a grad student? And I just kind of laughed. I'm like, getting paid more when you're done, I guess, because while you're doing it, it's not very much fun. But it's the same thing for law school or medical school. I don't know many lawyers that go, law school was awesome. It was so much fun. It's like, no, it's not. It's terrible. And I've heard the worst horror stories ever. But I mean, grad school is not that bad. It's just being able to balance everything. Being able, especially for me, our classes weren't at night, they were during the day. So, trying to find a good job that is only at night or on the weekends, well, that pretty much leaves bars. And I'm like, okay, that wouldn't be good, me going into school counseling and being a bouncer or bartender. Not very good. So that was the biggest challenge for me. Suggestions, I guess, I don't know, I don't have too many. For me, I liked going to grad school right away. I think it's good to go out there and work for a few years. For me, I liked going right away because I don't really have a grown-up life yet. Because I'm not married, I don't have a family, I don't need to provide for other people. I just need to worry about myself, so I can just live very cheap and get through grad school as quick as possible, and then get out and go on with the rest of my life. That's about it.
Hi, I'm Maia Heyman, and I graduated from St. Ben's in 2005 with a major in music, in bassoon performance, and a minor in German. Right after St. Ben's, I went to the University of Minnesota in the Twin Cities for a master's of music in bassoon performance, and then I followed that with my DMA, Doctorate of Musical Arts, and that is also a performing degree, but I'm also doing a secondary emphasis in ethnomusicology and a minor in linguistics. So I went straight through, and there are people in music who do take time off, but it often doesn't work out well, because with music you have to stay in practice. It's not something you can just study up on later. You have to be practicing regularly to get into grad school. So lots of people find it a lot easier to get in if you go directly from undergrad. I chose to go to grad school because I want to be a college professor. People who want to be performers, like classical orchestral performers, often stop after the master's So the master's is more focused on performance, whereas the doctorate is more on academics. And to be competitive in the job market for becoming a professor, you really need a doctorate. So that's why I do it. The application process for getting into a school of music is a little different from these other programs. You don't have to take the GRE. You usually don't have to do interviews. I don't think the personal statement is that important. It's primarily based on the audition. So the audition process can be really intense. So there's a lot riding on it. And for that reason, I think it's really important for students from schools like St. Ben's and St. John's to find out what the competition is going to be like, because I promise it's not anything like the music department here. Most people who go into grad school have a Bachelor of Music in their undergrad, and here the only degree that's offered is a Bachelor of Arts in Music, which is more liberal arts, whereas the Bachelor of Music is more performing and music classes. So starting out with that audition process, students from schools like this, liberal arts schools where they have a BA, are at a disadvantage in the performing. However, once I was in grad school, I found that my liberal arts background was really an advantage, and it kind of set me apart and got me into ethnomusicology and linguistics. I had an assistantship throughout my doctorate as a recording engineer, and these were all types of skills that I learned at a liberal arts college. So it's important to really play that up once you get in, because it will set you apart and get you ahead. So like I said, grad school in music is going to be a lot more competitive than at a friendly little liberal arts school, so you have to be prepared for that. When you're looking at schools, I would strongly recommend emailing or calling the professor that you're going to be studying with. So in my case, it would be the bassoon teacher at a school. The programs don't differ that much, and the school as a whole don't matter as much in music. What matters is that one teacher that you're going to be working individually with, because that can really make it a wonderful learning experience, or it can be awful, because you spend so much time with that person and they really dictate what your experience is going to be like. Also talk to students who are in the programs, because grad school is so different from going to school here. And when you contact professors at the schools you're interested in, they can usually hook you up with current students, and that is really useful. And like he was saying, it's a lot of work. I know a lot of people go into arts grad school programs as kind of a way of putting off real life, because it sounds so fun just spending all your time playing music. And it is, but it's a ton of work, and you have to be ready to be so completely focused on that because of the competition. So a lot of people experience burnout because you're just so in that one area. So really be prepared to be self-motivated. You won't have many classes. Usually performance degrees only have 1 or 2 academic classes per semester, so you have to have good time management, good self-motivation, and have a goal. Like, know what kind of career you want to go into. Like, for me, it's being a college professor, and that's why I'm going for the doctorate. But really, keep that in mind, be prepared, and if you're dedicated and know what you want to do, it will be a wonderful experience.
Cool. I'm Brianwavnack. I also graduated in '05. I had a little bit different experience than everyone else because I did a part-time program, an MBA, so it's not, I like to say that it's not real grad school because it's an MBA, it's not a master's degree really. But I graduated with a management degree at St. John's with an accounting minor, and always thought, I'm going to go into finance, it's going to be so fun, I want to be a financial advisor with people. Interviewed for that, realized it sounded horrible, and ended up working at Target, which turned out to be a great experience. And I've been there for 6 years now, while I've been going and getting my MBA as well, which is really nice. One thing I don't think anyone's mentioned is tuition reimbursement. If you can find someone to help you pay for your grad school, it makes it pretty nice. There's still, a lot of fees with it that you have to pay, but it is something to look at if you have that option. The reason I chose to go to grad school was when I was here, one of the professors said, if you're ever thinking about getting your MBA, you should study for the GMAT right now. Take it while you're in school mode because the score is good for 5 years. So I was definitely going to do that this summer between graduating and starting work, and never did it, put it off for about 3 years, and then I had to go back and learn the circumference of a circle and all those formulas that I hadn't used, so it made the GMAT a little tougher. I had to really study for it. But that was one I knew was really important as I was looking at where I wanted to go to school. The U of M was the only option for me to go because Target had a relationship with them. And that was the only one they did tuition reimbursement for, so I couldn't go to St. Thomas or Hamann. Then I would have to pay for it myself, which wouldn't be that bad, actually. But it is nice. So I knew I had to get the GMAT right because my undergrad GPA wasn't so hot. The GMAT was another component. I had a good work experience, so I knew I had that going for me. I had a boss who was going to write me a good letter of recommendation. I knew that would go a long way. So I knew my GPA was the weak point, but I had to find out how do I make sure there's no other weak points on my application. So that's one thing to look at of where are you going to stand above the kind of cohort you start your program with, and where might be that one blemish on your record or your application that will keep you from getting into the program. In terms of the perks of being a grad student, one of my favorite thing that I've done at the U of M so far is I studied abroad. That's my biggest regret in life is that I didn't study abroad at St. John's. So I was like, if I ever get a chance, I'm going to do it. So I did a 2-week study abroad in Costa Rica in January, which was great. So we did corporate social responsibility, which is something I had never even heard of, 6 years ago, but is now a pretty big topic in business of how do you act responsibly and ethically and do the right thing for society. So I went down to Costa Rica and learned about that for 2 weeks, which was great. The other perks of getting an MBA several years after I graduated is everything changes in the world. So things that are kind of key components of my program right now, I'm looking at a lot of marketing classes, and we're talking about, 3 years ago when I started, it was all about viral marketing. That was the only way to market was viral marketing. Now it's QR barcodes. Neither of those existed when I went to school here. So things change, so it might be worth it to wait if you don't know exactly what you want to get out of the program. In terms of kind of the drawbacks, again, the time commitment is huge. After working, an 8-9 hour day, going to class for 5 hours at night is pretty rough. And then especially also if you have, friends, family, make sure they're supportive of you. My wife doesn't love the fact that I'm gone for, 16 hours, 2 or 3 days a week, and she might see me during the week. Probably not, though. But I'm done in 41 days, so excited about that. So yes, if you think you have senioritis, nothing on me right now. So.
Thank you to all the panelists for your initial insights. We're going to open it up to Q&A now for the second half. So if there's any questions for specific panelists or the panel in general, now's the time.
I guess for the panel in general, how did you initially start your grad school search? I mean, you just go Google this, or how did you initially start looking?
For me, I knew I lived in the Twin Cities and I wanted to stay there, so that really narrowed my search right away. And I also knew I wanted a part-time program, so those are some things to look at. Also look at what do you want to get out of grad school? Do you want to be, a professor? Do you want to use it to enhance your career? Do you want it to learn a skill that you don't really have? And that will help you narrow what kind of program you should even look for. You don't want to go to a small school, at least my assumption, what I've seen as a small school, if you want to be a research professor. You want to go to a Research 1 school. That was one my wife went to grad school thinking she wanted to become a professor, learned that experience and decided she didn't want to. But at least she had that experience, and that's how she researched and how I researched mine completely differently. So.
In music, it's a lot about teacher networking. So you look at the teachers that the players you admire had and find out which schools they're at. So my teacher in my DMA now was the bassoon teacher of my teacher that I had here at St. Ben's. And that's often the way it works out, it seems.
For me, pretty much I just Googled. Because I knew I wanted to do school counseling, so I had that, and just looked up what schools in Minnesota and Wisconsin had it, and then did some extra research into the program. There were a couple schools in Minnesota that, they only had like 5 grad students who were in school counseling, so I was like, I don't really want to go there. So I looked at the ones that had the best reputation and then applied, and I ended up choosing St. Cloud State over the other schools because at all the other schools, there was a 3-year program or 4-year program of either 3-year full-time with summers off or 4 years part-time. And St. Cloud State, it's summer, fall, spring, summer, and then you go right into your internship, so you get out in 2 years. So that's how I said, all right, I'll do that. So that was it.
Yeah, I would say a little bit of online research and definitely connecting with your professors. For me in the science department, I think, the professors keep in contact with people who have graduated too, so they know, I've talked to students who have said this and this about certain grad programs. So I think they're a really good resource for you. And also alums, if you can get connected with the career services and do some job shadowing, and you're job shadowing people in the area that you want to be in, they can certainly tell you about their schools, and I think that was probably the most helpful for me. Then they can tell you pros and cons having been through their program, and also if you get connected with them and you keep in contact with them, they can be great sources for letters of recommendation in the future. So I think using your alum network is huge.
For me, it was twofold. Part of it was recognizing the geographic implications of wanting to get into public policy work. I knew I either wanted to be in the Twin Cities or in DC, so that kind of narrowed down my grad school looking into those 2 areas. Other programs that I had been looking at were in areas that weren't in state capitals, so if you're doing a public policy kind of program, you're not in a state capital, there aren't local internship opportunities as much. They're going to find around some of those places. And so I kind of narrowed it down to that point. The other issue is the role that my first boss and one of my key mentors played in the process. When I first graduated and went to go work for a nonprofit for a couple years, I was pretty upfront with them after I started that, eventually I did want to go into grad school. And at that point, I kind of decided that the Humphrey Institute is where I wanted to go. And my boss at the time said, I know you want to become a policy person, and the Humphrey Institute's a great school, but where I see you going on a career path isn't as an analyst or whatever, it's more as an executive manager side of things. So he said, while you're at the Humphrey, take classes at the U of M's business school. I said, okay, Lyle, I'll do whatever you tell me to do. So I go through the application process at the Humphrey, and in the meantime, once you take the GRE, your name gets sent to all sorts of folks, and you start getting mail from all over the place. For a while, going to Pepperdine in California sounded like a real good idea until I looked at the tuition level, and sitting in Malibu and paying $50,000 a year to become a government employee didn't quite make sense. But one of the things I got in the mail was from the University of Notre Dame, and there's a bit of a family history there. My dad's a domer, my two older brothers are domers. I was tired of being called my brother's names growing up, and so I said I'm not going to be a domer, I'm going to be a Johnny instead, and it's a much better school anyway. But there was always a part of me that regretted not going to Notre Dame, so I figured, okay, let's look at this grad school thing a little bit more. And as I researched a little bit more, I realized some real strong values that the program had, and I showed my boss the curriculum, and he said, basically, this is what you should be studying. So I looked into it a little bit more, and the Notre Dame program was actually more executive focused in training, so it's short, condensed learning opportunities. And so I realized in looking at the programs that I could do the 2 programs at the same time. So starting the summer of 2003, I was in South Bend taking classes at Notre Dame for the summer. Back at the U of M that academic year, back at South Bend that following year, the U of M the next academic year, and then back at Notre Dame for the last semester, or for the last summer. So in about 2.5 years, I completed both master's programs. One real nice thing is I had 9 credits of electives I needed to do for Notre Dame, and they let me basically double count some courses at the U of M. So it was a very efficient, although chaotic time in my life, but it was a good experience. And for me professionally, on any given day, I'm using the skill sets from one or the other program, depending on what I'm doing. So they've complemented each other really nicely, and I can guarantee I wouldn't be doing right now what I am if it wasn't for those for the training I received in those 2 programs.
I think it's important to research the type of program because there's a lot of different ESL programs, but some focus more on theory, and the program at Hamann focuses more on like application and discussion, and they have a lot of practicum experiences, so I think it's really useful if, depending on what your strengths are and what you need more practice in, to do that. And I was also going to say my sister just got accepted to a very specialized program. She's going for a doctorate in dance criticism, and there's only 4 programs in the country, so that kind of really quickly narrows your options. So she's out in Riverside, California. She got there yesterday. And before she went, they flew her out for a visit, and she got to stay with one of the current students in the program. She met with like probably 5 different professors in the program and sat in on some classes. So I'd say it's really great if you can do that, and they paid for the whole thing, like the flights and everything. So, and they wanted her, so they are paying for like her first year of tuition. So if you can find a program like that, that's huge bonus, because her other option that she got accepted to was NYU, and they were not going to pay at all. So I think cost is a huge factor in finding your niche, like your specialty area. So.
I have a question for Brian. You said you had the tuition reimbursement from Target. So how did that basically come about? Like, did they just mention that you were thinking about doing an MBA and then they offered it to you? Or?
Different companies will do it different ways. So most companies will do, there's a minimum with that the IRS, or sorry, not a minimum, maximum the IRS will allow companies to pay, and that's $5,200 a year. So any company can give that, and you don't get taxed on it. So most companies will do that. Target was seeing a lot of people leave to go get their MBA and then not necessarily come back. And it's also something a lot of companies are doing it, especially bigger companies, as a way to attract new employees of here, come work for a few years. Then you can do a part-time program. Some are actually even looking at giving you like a leave. So you've got to be there for a couple of years before they'd give you a leave. And then part of my agreement, though, is I will stay at Target for at least 2 years after I graduate. Otherwise, I have to pay it all back. So it's kind of a 3-year soft commitment, 2-year hard commitment, or 3-year hard commitment, 2-year soft commitment. And most companies will do something. So that's something as you're interviewing for jobs, ask what they offer. And if it's a smaller one, usually you can negotiate that. But Target's is pretty firm. This is covered. This isn't. So.
One for Kelsey and Scott, because you guys both said you worked in admissions for different schools. What's one thing you noticed the most of, like, when people apply that maybe undergraduates are missing in their application?
I should take the lead on that one.
I would say, like the thing I kind of said before, like that people just haven't looked into what they really want. So they're applying for a school, and what they're looking for isn't in that school. So if they come into an application, or they submit their application or come into an interview and they're saying, this is what I really want to do, and the admission panel is going, that's not what we do. That's just obviously not a good fit. So to catch that ahead of time, so you're not that person sitting in the chair, with the values that don't match up with where you're wanting to be. I know in the program like I went to, they require for physician assistants a certain amount of hours of direct patient care. So they have very strict standards. They want this much community service, this much patient care time. So there were those, hard standards that you had to meet. But I think outside of that, they're really looking for a well-rounded person. You know that everyone applying has those guidelines, and I think that's true for a lot of programs. There's strict guidelines, so everyone you're applying, and competing with has those things. So you need to look for those things that set you apart from that. So, for me in science, being surrounded by everyone that's applying to dental school, med school, PA school, we all were going to the same classes every day. I know that my gender and women's studies minor helped me get in because that's something a lot of science majors didn't have. And it, for me, was a good break from my science education. I could sit down at night and I didn't have to get out my biology book again. I could sit and read something different. So for me, it was a good break and a good mental health thing during school. But I think those little extras that set you apart, and St. Ben, St. John's has so much to offer in terms of, book groups or just other things like that, because when you're sitting in your interview and, they're going to ask you some about what you've been doing in your science curriculum or your business curriculum, but they're also going to say, what do you like to do for fun? What do you enjoy doing in your free time? And those are things you want to be able to bring up, these other things that you're active in. So I think that can really help set you apart.
Just a little bit to add to that, and just for full disclosure, I wasn't directly involved with the missions, but I was working with the folks who were on the committee, so I got a lot of feedback as to what they were looking for and looking at. From my understanding as to how this is at least kind of within the world of public policy and those types of degrees, test scores, GPA, and that kind of thing is just kind of a quick little checkbox. Make sure you've got the minimum qualifications to do the work that they're going to be prescribing to you over the 2 years. And then they look beyond that. What your, as I mentioned, one of the most critical things is the personal statement, at least within these types of programs. But then also, kind of your well-roundedness as a person, what's been your work experience, and so on and so forth. One of the interesting things during my time at the Humphrey Institute is that in the late 90s, a typical incoming class at the Humphrey Institute was about 100 students. By the time I was done with my program in 2005, we were up to about 200 students per year. So the diversity of backgrounds that we were seeing in students was much greater. We'd have people coming in with theater backgrounds and such that want to get into public policies that support the arts community or such. Obviously, a degree like public policy is very strong in economics, quantitative methods and such. And so as we were seeing these people come in with a greater variety of backgrounds, some of those skill sets weren't naturally there within their background. And so one of the things that the Humphrey required is if you hadn't completed an intro to economics course, you needed to have that done before you started the program that September. So most students who didn't have that in the background were taking it in the summer before. So one of the things for you all who are still students who are looking at graduate programs, look out and see kind of what the academic requirements are of it. And if you can complete some of those things while in school, it's going to be helpful. Conversely, if you're out of school and looking at going back to graduate school, taking the opportunity to do some of those course requirements prior to applying so you can show the admissions department, I didn't have economics in undergrad, but I took an econ course at the University of Minnesota, I got an A in it. It's going to demonstrate to them pretty quickly that you're going to be up to snuff on the level of work that you're going to be doing. And one of the nice things about graduate school is that in a number of cases you don't need a specific kind of background to go into the program. If you look at MBA programs, you can go in with an English major, you can go in with a management or accounting, you can go in with a music major. Same type of situation with public policy. Once you get into, if you're going to go get a PhD in chemistry, you should probably have a chemistry background, go in that type of situation, but more of the liberal arts style graduate programs have pretty diverse backgrounds.
You guys can remember what were some of the toughest interview questions that you faced interviewing in grad school?
I didn't have an interview process. It was written just 5 essays. The only one I remember is the optional one that was just tell us anything else about you. that would influence our decision. And that's where I really highlighted why I was such a great fit, and even tried to turn, some of the weaker spots of my application into strengths of, well, at St. John's, I didn't focus on my academic career quite as much, but, I was a chair of these committees on, JEC, and I founded this club, and, here are all these kind of leadership roles I took, and I developed, a lot of those kind of relationship skills at St. John's, and that's really what they look for, is how are you going to, be a part of the Carlson community, and really kind of make your mark in that school. So that was the one that I definitely took, where it said optional. I was like, yeah, I'm using that to showcase what I want them to see.
Like I said, for music, there's not really an interview process, and there aren't essays. It would typically talk to the person who would be your teacher at that school, but it's not a formal interview. So I can't really say anything about the format of that or what to expect, because it's so casual and different from school to school. There's the audition, and the requirements for that vary from place to place also. Typically, you'd prepare a piece or two, and there's often a list of excerpts that you have to go through, and there's often sight reading, but no real interview.
I had an interview with about 15 other applicants, and it probably got me into the program, because if I was looking at me on a sheet of paper, I worked admissions at St. Cloud State too, and I went, if I wants to be a school counselor, has no undergrad psych, has no education classes, and was pre-law, I'd be like, what's going on here? So, so the interview portion kind of saved me, because, I could put on there, I could talk about why I wanted to be a school counselor, and actually, I think the hardest question for everybody in the room, I actually got it right, but it's part of researching the program you're going into. They asked, what is your understanding of a normal day of a school counselor? And, there were some people that would say, that it was just meeting with students and talking about their feelings, or talking, and I'm like, well, I'm at the wrong place. And I'm like, well, it's a mixture of a lot of things. You got to talk about their, academics, testing, personal, social, home life, extracurriculars, everything. It's everything. And they're like, oh, he actually knows what it is. So for an interview, do some research, think of some questions that they could ask you specific to the program.
I would say, too, if you can talk to somebody who's been through their interview before, where you're applying, that can be helpful. At UWL, they do group interviews, so they interview 3 at a time, like a panel of 5 interviews 3 people, which is really intimidating. And if I hadn't known that going in, I probably would have left, because I was and they make you all go through the line and introduce yourselves like we did. But it was me who was in my senior year of college, a nurse who had been in neonatology for 17 years. I figured she was a shoo-in, and a guy who was doing cancer research with a master's degree. And I was beaten down. And the hardest question for me was, they said, okay, we're going to let you all in, hypothetical, we're going to let you all into school, 1 this year, 1 the year after, and 1 the year after that. Figure out amongst yourselves who's 1, 2, and 3, and get back to us in 60 seconds. So that's our first question. So we all turned to each other, and, well, and one person was a real go-getter and said, well, I did this, this, and this. I think I should probably be the first. And then I kind of looked at the nurse and I said, well, I think you're second, because, so I guess that puts me at third. And they had over 100 applicants, and only 12 got in, and I got in. So I think a lot of places are really looking at how you can work with people. But knowing what to expect when you sit in that chair, so that when that happens, you don't just shut down, I think is really important. So you can keep going and kind of focus on the next question, and you can come back from those things. So.
And for the Humphrey Institute, they don't do interviews. But one thing that I would recommend for all of you who are looking at grad programs is take advantage of going to the prospective student days. All grad school programs are going to, or most of them are going to have those types of opportunities. And the reality is the folks you're going to be meeting there are faculty, admission staff, alums, and such. And it's another way for them to get to know who you are as a person, as a potential student, above and beyond what you are just on paper. It puts a face on the story. It gives you the chance to kind of give them the other stories that you don't include in your application. And I can guarantee when they're sitting around the table going file by file by file, talking about which students to enroll and which ones not to, those folks who have the chance to interact with you are going to be bigger advocates for you than they are going to be, you know, Joe Smith, who they just know by what they have on the paper in front of them.
I didn't have an interview either, but the way I kind of went through the process is I did the certificate program for ESL at Hamlin, and then the advanced certificate, and then by that time I'd already, like, you know, I gotten good grades, so they knew that I could handle the coursework, and so it wasn't really hard after that. Like I was saying, I could use some of the professors that I had classes with and some of the papers that I'd written in my application.